Welcome to the Labor Radio Podcast Network's live 2020 election coverage, focusing on what organized labor is doing throughout the United States to ensure all votes are counted and labor's voice is heard. Reporting will be based on contributions from our national network of members. The views expressed do not represent official positions of the network. The Labor Radio Podcast Network has over 70 labor-focused shows in 4 countries and serves as a one-stop shop for audiences looking for labor content and as a resource for labor broadcasters, podcasters, and content producers. You can follow the conversation with the hashtag LaborRadioPod, where we are broadcasting working people's voices 24 hours a day.
All right, welcome back, folks. What is this? Hour 5, hour 6? I don't know. It's 10 o'clock here on the East Coast. Kind of lost track. Anyway, this is the Labor Radio Podcast Network with our first ever national live stream. Thanks so much for joining us. There we go. And it's very good to have you all here. We've got a couple things I want to do. Alan, you have a report from our Facebook stream that you should share with us.
Sure. So the report is just a comment that was left by Betty Maloney, asking us why we're not addressing tomorrow's demos and the power of a general strike, to put the power in the hands of working people and not in the Democratic Working Families Party.
Anybody want to address that?
I think we're pro.
I think the problem is.
Go ahead, Steve.
I was going to address that.
Take it. Go run with it.
Yeah, I think the problem is that the trade union have an electoral strategy. I think the last mass labor rally that I saw was when Humphrey was running. There are a couple 100,000 workers in D.C., but there's been no mobilization of labor against the attacks that it faces. Mass mobilization. I'm talking about workers' mobilization. And we were talking earlier about a labor channel, or labor media. Well, I mean, the unions are spending hundreds of millions of dollars in election campaign. In California, they're spending millions, maybe 50, 60 million dollars, but we don't even have a channel here. There's no political education. There's no ideological education. In fact, the word class struggle hasn't even come up here. The working class is in a class struggle, and yet it's not mentioned. So when you have a corporatist perspective, which is what I think it is, you're not going to be able to politically educate working people about the real conditions and real attacks. We have a corporate president. We have two corporate parties. People hoped that Obama was going to pass legislation when there was a majority of the Democrats in the legislature, in the Congress. They didn't do it. So I think that the lack of mobilization, the reliance on the politicians to solve their problems, the fact in the discussion today, and that's what somebody asked, they're having a protest tomorrow. There are going to be protests on Saturday, but there's no real campaign to get people on the streets and to take industrial action, worker action. In fact, the issue of a general strike has been raised by different labor councils, and Liz wasn't asked about it. What is her thoughts about it? I mean, there's a dispute in who's going to run for the AFL-CIO. What is her position on that issue? Should the unions prepare for a general strike? Should they talk about the issue of a general strike? So we're facing really a catastrophic situation. I mean, another thing I want to talk about is even public workers. The plan of the Republicans is to bankrupt cities and state governments, public governments, and to attack the pensions. Yet the unions, the public worker unions, have had no united front against the attack on public workers to demand that public workers be funded. Well, if you can't unite even the public workers politically, AFSCME, SEIU, AFT, these public, CWA, my union, how are you going to be able to challenge this if every union does its own separate thing? And this is the state of the labor movement right now, which is very dangerous. And it's used by Trump and the union busters to their advantage.
Good question, and I'm going to say that Steve's response is a good start on a discussion that we need to have. Before we do that, though, I want to welcome a couple of new guests that have just joined us. John Coleman is an organizer with SMART, I believe, Local 7. Is that right, John? Out of, but I'm not sure where you're based. So if you can, and let me just also introduce John McIntosh, who lost my place here. John, I know you're an editor. Oh, Northwest publication. Harold was supposed to introduce you.
That's okay. I can introduce myself. Yeah, I'm Don McIntosh, and I'm a labor reporter at the Northwest Labor Press, which is a union newspaper in Portland. Basically cover Oregon and Southwest Washington labor and politics.
And did a great story on the network, so thank you for that. All right, so John, why don't you just start with some of the races that you're tracking? I know the polls are still open for a while there, but just what you're looking at, and then we'll jump over to Brother Coleman.
Sure. Well, there's a couple actually of congressional seats in play, and one in Oregon. We hope it's not in play, but Peter DeFazio has been a long time, really reliably pro-labor Democrat and a fierce opponent of NAFTA-style trade deals. It happens that this year he has a very well-funded campaign by a young guy named Alex Skarlatos, who was the National Guardsman who happened to be on a train in Paris when a terrorist was trying to do something, and there was a movie made about him, and so he's a little bit of a celebrity. But so local labor, I think Oregon labor is a little worried that DeFazio, might get taken out by him. But we'll know almost certainly tonight, I would think. And then the other one is in Harold's area. That's Carolyn Long, she ran a strong Democratic challenge to Jamie Herrera Butler, which is sort of like one of these sort of Republican robots that the machine manufacturers. Not much very interesting about her, but she's been representing Southwest Washington for a while, and so there's some hope that Carolyn Long may take her out tonight. In Oregon, it's actually the state that started with vote by mail 20 years ago. It went to all elections being held exclusively by vote by mail. So it's been sort of amusing to see all of the, fear mongering and falsehood peddling about why this is a terrible idea. It's actually, in many respects, it's a efficient, safe, really very reliable system for doing elections. A lot of what we'll in Oregon, I think, have our eyes on tonight are ballot measures, both state and local. Oregon is also sort of known as a state that does a lot of legislation by ballot measure, for better or worse, mostly for better in recent years. And so there's a couple of measures. One would ban, or I should say, would allow restrictions on money in politics, which has been a huge problem. People might think of Oregon as being this sort of progressive state, and it is in some respects, but it actually has, through a peculiarity of its state Supreme Court, how it treats money basically as speech. It has almost no restriction on spending, and so you see like astronomical sums being spent even in state legislative races. So a lot could rest in terms of future change on whether voters pass that, which it looks like it will pass. There's also a very interesting drug sort of legalization. Basically, it would not legalize, but decriminalize the possession of basically all kinds of drugs, heroin, methamphetamine, and so forth. The idea being it's a public health issue, not primarily a criminal one. And so folks who, right now are clogging up the justice system, a lot of expense involved in that, would be instead referred to on-demand treatment. And so, and interestingly funded by our marijuana tax, which is doing very well. So, so that could be exciting. And I would want to flag one other. It's just in Multnomah County, which is the county that contains Portland and a couple of east side suburban communities. But there's a ballot measure on tonight, basically a preschool for all, universal preschool. And what's so exciting about it is it's funded by a tax on the very highest income residents, basically only the top 5 or 6% of county residents, the most well off, would pay, and it would make preschool, for 3 and 4 year olds available to all children in Multnomah County, free, and it would more than double the pay of the preschool teachers. It would actually put them on par with kindergarten. So it's really, I think, as is likely to pass, and it's could be, I hope, copied elsewhere, and it would really be a game changer, quite frankly, for working families in this community. Like, this is a $10,000, $12,000 a year proposition to try and get your kid in preschool. It would free up working people to go to work or go to school who right now are staying at home because they can't afford preschool. So I don't know. It's just in our county, but I'm hoping that will catch on elsewhere.
Great overview, Don. Thank you so much. Really exciting. And I love through the network of all the different shows, I've been really getting a crash course of some of these local candidates and local issues from a labor perspective. And it's been just, because to me, that's really, everybody likes to pay attention to the big sexy races, but it's the stuff down at the ground level, like you're talking about, that really makes a difference to people's pocketbooks. So thanks for that. We're going to open up to questions in just a sec, but John, you're an organizer. You're also, I believe, a poll watcher in Michigan, I believe. So I'd love to hear how that went.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, so I live, I'm with Smart Local 7. We cover the lion's share of the state of Michigan. We don't have the greater Metro Detroit, Ann Arbor area, but we have the other 73 counties. So we go all the way from Jackson all the way to the Wisconsin border. So I live in Traverse City. Our main office is in Lansing. So I work out of the Lansing office. So I was a poll watcher and a challenger in Traverse City tonight. Traverse City, you know, if you could look at the map, just north of Lansing, going all the way to the mighty Mack Bridge, is a sea of red. There's a little discrepancy over by Saginaw Bay City, but other than that, Traverse City is a blue dot. And just to the west of Traverse City is Leelanau and Benzie, and they are purple trending blue. So Don Jr. was here Saturday. Trump was here, I think, yesterday. And so the poll watching in my precinct was fine. All the clerks did a pretty good job. We had about 3 or 4 people didn't want to wear a mask. One guy was wearing American flag without a mask, and all these random things. One guy didn't have he had a MAGA hat on, and he kind of threw a fit. Other than that, it was fairly calm. I'm on the Slack app with the Michigan Dems throughout the state, all the poll watchers and challengers. So I've been trying to keep up with that as the night is going through, and it's across the board. I'm getting reports all the way from Marquette, Sault Ste. Marie, which traditionally used to be old school Dems, and Marquette's still holding its own. The Sioux is slightly changing. I'm getting things from Grand Rapids, like urban Grand Rapids. I'm sorry, Biden is stomping Trump in some of these urban areas of Grand Rapids. But then when you get west of that, kind of to in the Betsy DeVos, Milliken area, it's across the board. I don't have a read. I'm kind of got butterflies, to tell you the truth.
Welcome to our world, John.
Yeah, and then other than that, the Michigan, it's pretty divided on the state level. We were looking to gain 4 seats in the House. One of those seats was actually in my district, Dan ONeal. He ran last time and lost by 330 votes. And the person he lost to was under federal indictment when he ran, and nobody knew. So we've been door knocking.
Hold up. I didn't know about it. So how are you under indictment and nobody knows?
So in a nutshell, real quick, the Tea Party, Michigan, if you didn't run, they were going to run you out.
Okay, there we go.
They were going to run you out. So he was trying to bribe the Carpenters Union for votes for money, and they turned him into the FBI. The FBI put him under indictment, and it never came out before the elections. It came out 3 weeks after the elections or something. It was anyway. So Dan lost by 333 votes is what it was. Anyway, so he's one of the 4 we're hoping to gain. So my precinct that I watched tonight, we had approximately 2,700 registered voters in my precinct. We had approximately 1,300 absentee ballots turned in. And at my precinct, there were 824 people voted in person. So it was about 2,200, give or take. So that it's pretty high number turnout in Traverse City. And I don't know if that's good or not. I don't know. You know, I'm really, it's tough, man. I'm hoping Detroit and Lansing come through for us. I really am.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. All right.
Yeah.
So hold on there for a second to open it up. Steve Zeltzer, are you still there? I wanted to see if we can get a quick report from California. Let me go over to our smart brother here, Jeremy, and see if you've got a comment or questions, brother.
I do, man. So I've been, as I said earlier, I've been kind of glued to it on the side, paying attention here and here, and I'm getting text messages from my brother who's lives in Pennsylvania, and I just sent him a message before John started speaking that at the beginning of that night I was hoping for a slaughter, and now I'm praying for a win. And it sucks, man. It sucks to be in this this awkward place, especially knowing that the tighter the race is going to be, the longer it's probably going to take for us to have any sort of conclusion to it, one way or another. And yeah, it sucks, man. And John, you look tonight the way I felt yesterday. I got to tell you, man, you definitely look like you put in a day. For sure.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he does.
And it's appreciated.
Evan, I think's got a question.
John, I grew up in Muskegon, where Trump came to visit not too long ago for a big rally, and went to school in Ann Arbor. My brother still lives there. Michigan is definitely my child. That's where I grew up. And I'm interested, in 2016, there was a lot of reporting from Greg Palast on Crosscheck in Detroit area where 70,000 ballots were thrown off or something like that. And the margin of error, I think, was only 10,000 in 2016. Are you seeing any problems with voter suppression, or, I mean, how do you feel about that right now? Because I'm just looking at this Politico right now and saying 34% of the expected vote is in, and Donald Trump's up 1 million to Joe Biden at 780,000 in Michigan.
I don't know. I've been on the Slack app with all the poll watchers across the state, and voter turnout is high. I think we had more people vote absentee or early than we voted, I think, the last election, or it's pretty close. And the reports from Detroit I were getting all day, like down by Ada, there were some guys with some shotguns in the parking lot. There's lines there, like, let's see, over by Blair Township, which is just east of Traverse City. There were still lines at 9 o'clock, and that's like a low district. Muskegon Heights, I actually saw one of the precinct reported, there were like 10,000 people voted in Muskegon Heights I can't remember the precinct number, but it was a lot.
Muskegon Heights, there's the kind of white area all around the water, and then there's railroad.
Yep.
And it's Muskegon Heights, and it's 90% Black and Hispanic. So.
Yep. Yeah. So I know Trump won Michigan by like 10,000 votes. I just don't know. I've heard, so there were I know there were GOP challengers out and lawyers out in Romulus and around Detroit, but I haven't heard anything confirmed. Everything, like all the numbers the Slack is, I'm getting about 190 messages every 10 minutes. I'm flipping through, and they're all over the board. It's hard to even keep track. And I'm like, I've got kind of butterflies, like the Muskegon Heights, like they're blown away. But then some of them, like even like Flint, like Biden won in some of these precincts in Flint, but John James beat Senator Peters. And I was like, oh no, like, you know, it's just
like in Michigan.
I know. So I'm really kind of dumbfounded. I'm kind of sweating here a little bit.
Let me give you a chance to catch your breath there. Go back to Don. Don, I'd love for you to talk about being a labor press journalist, because I think, the media in general has been taking a real hit in recent years, and none more so than the labor press, frankly. So if you can talk about what it's like being, how many labor papers are there left?
I think only a handful, actually, and there used to be quite a few more. I kind of, sometimes I have a dark sense of humor, and I like to joke with my friends that I've attached myself to two declining institutions, labor and journalism. But the truth is that I have some optimism for a comeback in labor. And even though journalism is in really tough times and it's shed tremendous numbers of jobs, basically all my colleagues in the mainstream media have transitioned to PR or washing dishes or whatever. But I think, in our case, we're sort of holding on. The labor press, Northwest Labor Press, has been around since 1900. It was founded by a group of unions locally. It's independent, although it's very connected to the local union movement. And it's a small publication, comes out twice a month, goes out to about 55,000 union households. But remarkably, we're in the black and, have healthy reserves, and I expect to be around for at least a few more years. No sign of extinction anyway. But, I would say I feel like I have, one time I felt especially a lonely beat. Certainly there aren't that many labor reporters in the business press. It's changing a little bit, I think. I've seen, particularly in the national and online media, a tremendous increase in interest in organized labor and just sort of issues that matter to working people in the last 5 to 10 years. And of course, you guys are all, people watching this are hopefully familiar with the wave of unionization that's taken place at a lot of the marquee online media. That's been very encouraging. I think there's just a lot of sort of interest in labor and labor media and stories about labor. Certainly the polls, I think, in terms of our long-term, prognosis are relatively good. The folks that are the most highest levels of approval of unions are actually the youngest people. So I see that there's potential growth, anyway. I don't know if that was answering your question or not. What's it like to be a labor journalist? Lonely sometimes, and very exciting and a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I've been watching it for years, and there was a time when there were labor press associations, and it's just, it does mirror the decline overall, but because it was smaller when it started out. But like you, I've definitely seen much more of an interest in recent years. It has also mirrored. Liz Shuler was on earlier. She talked about I think a 65% approval rating, which is kind of nuts for the labor movement, for folks to think that highly of the labor movement, but it makes sense to me. And a lot more organizing and a lot of strikes, which the strike, just a few years ago was supposedly dead, right? You just supposedly could not do a strike, and the teachers like, screw that, we're going to strike.
Yeah, I've been watching that very closely for a long time. Every year the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out its list of big strikes, and they're not always super accurate, but by and large, it's a pretty sad sort of indicator until a few years ago. And really, you saw just a dramatic uptick, more than you'd seen in decades. I ascribe to the theory really of Joe Burns. For those who aren't familiar with him, he wrote a book called Reviving the Strike. And I think I've yet to see any argument that says he's wrong, where basically, labor's power comes from the ability to, make any adversary feel some pain. And the way you do that, the biggest, most effective weapon in the arsenal is the strike, withholding labor, not just withholding labor, but, whatever it is that you were supposed to be doing that doesn't get done during a strike. And if you can succeed in that, then you have real leverage. And so I feel like sometimes the exceptions prove the rule, like the very, very high wage jobs, like on the longshore or at Boeing, to some extent to the efficiency and the goodness of the work, but it owes a lot to their strategic ability to strike over the years. So I guess I'm sort of hopeful that, how you get the goods is by striking. If you go to a collective bargaining situation and, you say, well, I want X, and they say no, and the question is, well, what are you going to do about it? And the answer is nothing. Well, then what are you doing there, right? So I'd like to see more strike readiness, more strike preparation, and more strikes, just because it's like one of those muscles that, it's going to go really atrophy if you don't ever use it.
Well, and Steve, I'm trying to get Steve back, but we started out this whole sudden kind of talking about a question that was raised in the Facebook chat about specifically about general strikes, but I think more to the point is this question about strikes in general, right? I mean, if the number of strikes is low, the number of general strikes is exceedingly low, but when you look at strikes or movements, right? There's things that come from above that are organized, and I've been in, rooms when, folks are organizing those. And then there's stuff like, and I'm thinking of Black Lives Matter, where nobody really organized it, or the teachers' strike in West Virginia, which was not led by the AFT. The AFT got on board and supported it, but it was not led by the AFT. It was teachers connecting over Facebook and striking. That was them doing it themselves. And a lot of these strikes that you're talking about in the last few years have been from the bottom up, not from the top down. And to me, that's part of the answer to this question. Is that if you wait for the leadership to organize it, you're going to be waiting a long time. And I want to welcome Tina Turner Morfitt, who is another labor journalist, in this case with radio, KBOO, labor radio, which is in, remind me of where exactly that is, Tina?
It's in Portland, Oregon.
Well, we got a whole Northwest thing going on. We started in the South and we moved to the great Northwest. Wonderful to have you, Tina. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your show?
Well, sure. I've been a labor activist for over 40 years. I'm currently retired. I was previously represented by AFSCME. I'm a retiree now, so I belong to their retiree chapter. And I am the president of the Oregon chapter of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists.
Wonderful. Well, it's great to have you on board and another part of our labor network here. And I think we do have Steve back. I was hoping to get a report on if anything is happening in the great state of California. But in the meantime, I'm going to open it up to questions from Evan, Jeremy, or Gene. There's Steve. Steve, what's happening in California?
Well, I mean, people are going out and voting, and there is a high turnout in California. But the votes aren't going to start being counted until 8 o'clock, half an hour. But
Okay.
I mean, a major issue has been this, Prop 22, which is going to allow the Uber and Lyft and other companies to basically prevent unionization. And
well, the thing about 22 was that it's, the legislature, I think was passed, was it last year, making those folks employees, and Prop 22 is an attempt to overturn what was done by the legislature, right? I think that was mine.
It hasn't been overturned. It's still the law. They're appealing it. Yeah, they're appealing it. It went into effect January 1st. One of the things the law requires is that they have to pay workers' compensation, besides disability, Social Security, unemployment. But what has happened is that they haven't been prosecuted. In California, it's illegal for these companies not to pay workers' compensation. It's a crime, misdemeanor. And they haven't been prosecuted by either the District Attorney of San Francisco or the California Attorney General. They should have been arrested, because it would have brought up to people the fact that these gig companies are basically not providing for the workers. And when they get in an injury, an accident, they end up at a public hospital. It's a cost shifting. And $7 billion a year in California is going to these gig companies, and it's being paid for by the public. So it's basically the companies cost shifting to the public their costs, which is an important issue. So, that's been a big issue. Also, Prop 15. One of the things in California is you have a 2/3 majority in California, the legislature. Now, this is what we're talking about, the Democrats, the Democratic Party. In California, they have a 2/3 supermajority in the legislature, in the Senate and the Assembly. They could pass a tax on the oil company, say a depletion oil tax, which Texas and Alaska has to fund education. They're not doing it. So even though we have a supermajority in California, the legislature is not really going after and taxing big companies, the billionaires. So you have a situation in which there are a lot of, and this is what I was referring to early, a lot of cities and counties and even the state government may go bankrupt in California. And if the Republicans take over, they will go bankrupt.
What's the Democrats' argument for why they're not doing this?
Because they're controlled by the billionaires, that's why. I mean, that's Jerry Brown, actually, his father, Jerry Brown's father was Edmund Brown. After he left being governor, he became counsel for Occidental Petroleum. Mm-hmm. And he actually, Sukarno, or the dictator in Indonesia, made a deal that for every barrel of oil he imported to California, he would get $1 as part of his payoff. So, you know, Governor Brown is supporting fracking in California, even though he says he's an environmentalist who wants to save the climate. So, you know, not Governor, rather Governor Newsom. So, you know, there are these contradictions in the legislature, and these things, they could pass major taxation, but they're not doing it. The situation among workers now, and this is I interviewed this guy from the Richard Hooker, from the Teamsters in Philadelphia, and one of the important points he said is that with Amazon growing now nationally as a major player, if the Teamsters do not organize Amazon,
it just refreshed.
Yeah, it's shut down.
If the Teamsters do not organize Amazon, this could be a threat to the entire Teamsters union.
Stupid Louis Gohmert one.
Yeah, I know. And
we're getting some, Tina, I think we're getting some
bleeding coming up
from you there, actually.
Pardon me?
I think we're getting some sound from you, or maybe it's over on there.
How many percentage of
let me bring John Coleman back in. I'm just wondering about what some of the issues are in your state as well.
Yeah, but that's urban. It's probably all county.
Yeah, we had a few issues on the ballot. I still getting a lot of. Oh yeah, so there were a couple. One of them was that they wanted to have.
Oh, there we go.
All right, yeah. So one of them, they wanted to open up the state parks to oil and gas companies to lease out for revenue. That was one of them. So they wanted to get more money for the state parks, but they wanted to do it they didn't necessarily say fracking or whatever, but they wanted to do that. Then another one was that they wanted to you have to have a search warrant to access somebody's web data on their phone or something like that. So that was another one. Then other than that, they were just kind of millages. There was a local millage. I can't even remember off the top of my head now. They were pretty low key, really. The big one, Michigan's a pretty big oil state. Like right now we got that Line 5. A lot of people don't know about Michigan. We have a bridge that's kind of like the Golden Gate, the Mackinac Bridge, 5 miles. There's a pipeline that goes underneath it. It's from Enbridge, which is a Canadian company, and it goes across the Upper Peninsula. It's on the lake bottom of the Straits of Mackinac. Then it goes down, and then it goes down towards Detroit, and it crosses into Canada, and then it goes to the Marathon plant. So they've been wanting to shut down this line for quite a few years now, and they're doing a pretty good job. But what Enbridge ended up doing is Enbridge wants to now build a tunnel underneath the Straits of Mackinac, which is, I think, 240 feet deep. They want to build a tunnel that way that's not getting in the water source and all these kind of things. So you have, it's a pretty hot button issue. You have environmentalists going head to head now, and Democratic environmentalists going head to head now with Democratic labor unions over infrastructure plans, so this state tax on the parks to open it up to fracking and oil is kind of goes hand in hand with that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a pretty big it's been a pretty big mess.
I remember seeing that when I was traveling up there, seeing that pipeline and that bridge, and it's just, you have people who are not from around there have no idea,
It's huge.
just how it's huge.
Yeah, it's so the McIntosh Bridge, it's a 5 mile suspension bridge. I think it's actually longer than the Golden Gate. It's just as high, but it's not as high off the water.
Mm-hmm.
And it spans Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. And the guys who put it in, they put it in. It was only supposed to be in for 50 years. It's going on, I think, 60 years old now. And there's been a couple anchor strikes and all these random things that have hit this pipeline, and it's held up. And Enbridge, they pump, hundreds of thousands of gallons and barrels of oil through this thing from Edmonton. Essentially is where it starts and comes down. And so I think they're going to invest. They want to invest, I think it's $500 million. It's a lot of money into building this tunnel. And so it's divided the Democratic Party between the environmentalists and the building trades people. And, Governor Whitmer, she did a pretty good job of like walking the line. And what she kind of did is kind of kick the can to the Attorney General to make a call on this. That way she can kind of keep her hands clean, and stay out of it. Yeah, it's
I was gonna say good luck with that. That's usually,
Yeah, I don't know how it's gonna work. She really did a good job. When she ran against Bill Schuette, she kind of stomped him pretty bad. Which, it was great. It was really good, but I don't know how it's gonna play down the line. I really don't.
Well, and it's been really interesting seeing that state of Michigan has this amazing, labor history, but then, in recent years, it's just kind of been, it's become, this interesting state, both locally and nationally, right?
Yeah, and I don't know, I'm a building trades union member, and, it's the home of the UAW, Detroit, Flint, Saginaw, that whole I-75 corridor. But when you tell people you're a union member in Michigan, they look at you with this animosity of the UAW guy who doesn't do anything all day, and you get out some of these rural areas, and I don't really, I've been trying to put my finger on it. I really don't know what it is. And I was thinking about it today when I was sitting there, and I think like a lot of these rural areas used to be the 3rd or 4th tier supplier to a lot of these like GM and Ford and Chrysler and things like that. And when those jobs went overseas or they got downsized or whatever, all these towns, a lot of them have dried up. Like there's not much there. And there's some companies still there, but there's no more union presence, And so I think maybe like in the back of people's minds that maybe the union has abandoned them, but maybe companies haven't abandoned them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the mentality that they have, because these rural areas, Cadillac, Michigan, Alpena, Houghton Lake, even parts of Muskegon, Adrian, Jackson, red can be. And I just don't know why, because these people, like, there's nothing there. There's the jobs are a good job is 12 or 13 bucks an hour. A great job is 16 or 17, and it's you go there and you talk to these people. When I stop at shops, I stop at job sites, and I'm telling them I'm from the union. They look at you. I had one guy tell me, I don't need union wages. And I was like, what? It threw me for such a loop. I was like,
it's a deindustrialization of America, the Rust Belt.
It is.
And these people feel they have no hope. And that's why Trump was elected. There's been a decline, 30, 40 years of real living wages, and people see no hope. And NAFTA was supported by these politicians, the Democrats. So in fact, Trump was using that against Biden, saying, look, you voted for NAFTA.
Mm-hmm.
which, you know, it's a fair point. Let me just welcome a couple of new folks. Shannon Myers, the other co-host of Working to Live in Southwest Washington, rounding out our Northwest cadre here. So good to have you back, Shannon. Welcome. And Deborah Hall. And forgive me, Deborah, I have completely forgotten where you're from, so you're going to have to introduce yourself.
I'm from Portland, KBOO Labor Radio, and also with Oregon CBTU.
Oh, you're part of that's wonderful. That's great. We've
Yes.
got the whole Portland Northwest radio, newspaper, organizing.
Hello.
Right, still fighting.
You know it, coming live from Southwest Washington here.
All
We
right.
don't have any results yet, but we've got like 22 minutes and all of my stuff is ready so I can give people updates if you guys want to hear them.
Nice.
Over to you, Shannon. Over to you. So I'm gonna actually, sort of yield it to you. You've got a bunch of colleagues here, and I think let's. I don't know too much about KBOO. We've had a little. Don briefed us a bit on his background, but I'd love to find out more. But Shannon, I'll let you take lead on that.
Ooh, for all of my Pacific Northwest people. So, all right, that sounds great. We have a great group of people here. I know KBOO actually is a local radio station, and you guys do a lot of talk radio, and you actually have a lot of spotlights on the labor movement. You want to talk about all of that good stuff you guys are doing?
Certainly, I'll kick it off. And so with Oregon CBT, hello folks, let me introduce myself, Deborah Hall. I'm again with Oregon CBTU. We have been hosting labor radio on the first Mondays on KBOO. I'm gonna guess we're probably in our 7th or 8th year. We kicked off on Labor Day of that year, and KBOO does have a labor radio show each Monday. And they have for, I am probably going to guess 20 plus years. KBOO has been around for 40, 50 years, long time station, pretty popular station as Independence Golem as well. A lot of good action going on there, and we're still trying to do things virtually during COVID. And I'm going to say pretty successfully. Everybody's jumped on the podcast bandwagon, Zoom, get our little recorders out recording. And so we've been able to do some pretty good shows in light of COVID going on. And my president, Tina Turner-Morford, is on the call as well. Hey, Tina, I'll let you jump in and offer something. Hey. All right, anything you care to add on the CBTU side for us, Tina?
What we try to do is we try to bridge the gap between Black workers and their unions, because a lot of their unions are not going into the neighborhoods where they live. And so when we think about our shows, we're trying to look at things that are relevant to Black workers, trying to remind them that if they don't tell them what their needs are, then their union can't address their needs.
Absolutely. And we've been busy. And then currently we are involved with the Defend Democracy Coalition, which is a group of about 50 plus organizations from the area and some national organizations as well. We will be having an event starting tomorrow, have a rally, I'm going to march at Revolution Hall, 3 o'clock. We'll be marching downtown. And then there's also going to be a labor follow-up event, a labor-led march and rally on Sunday, November 8th, starting at 2 p.m. So we're active. Portland has been in the streets for 150 days, 160 days. So
and where is that rally on Saturday, sis?
Sunday.
Is it Sunday?
Yes, and it is not Szymanski Park, Terry Shrunk at 2 p.m. So downtown. And that is going to be sponsored by, the primary sponsor of that is Portland Jobs with Justice.
So one of the things that CBTU did during this election cycle is that we partnered with a group called EWMC, which is affiliated with IBEW's, their Electrical Worker Minority Caucus. Because again, I don't see very many Black union members who are that engaged with their unions. And so the idea of partnering with EWMC was to get more Black union members out to vote, make sure they were registered, make sure that they got out and vote, and also to, again, bridge that gap, because we know that our different unions were doing things, but like I said, not all the time were Black members that engaged. And so we were able to, like I said, build a coalition with them in order to make that happen.
Right.
Well, that's awesome. And Dawn, did you talk yet? I came in late. I wasn't sure if you already talked about everything that the labor press and anything that you've heard from the Pacific Northwest.
The labor press.
Yeah.
Hi there. Yeah, I spoke a little bit earlier about what we do at the Labor Press and some of the top races we'll be watching tonight in Oregon. I figure I should leave the Southwest Washington stuff to you guys, otherwise I'll embarrass myself.
Oh, no. Well, we have no results, obviously. Nothing's coming in yet. But we always expect results to start at 8, but we usually don't know races probably for 2 or 3 days if they're close, because we are mail-in.
People, that's right, because one of the big differences is Washington actually allows votes to be counted if they're postmarked by election day. So you really don't have even all the votes in on election day, whereas Oregon, you have to get it in by then. So we actually are I was mentioning earlier, we're the first state in Oregon to go all vote by mail. And they're pretty fast. Generally speaking, you'll know the results within half an hour to an hour, which is nice. When it's very, very close, it can drag on for a few days, and there's the ones that you're not sure about, and there's they have to be looked at. How are you feeling about Carolyn Long?
Oh, geez.
Is she gonna win?
I just looked at the numbers in Southwest Washington, and we actually have almost 81% voting rate at this point,
yes,
which means
the 2008 record.
I'm not quite sure, but oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever seen 80% in a long time. I don't know if I've ever seen it in an area that I've lived in. So if we vote, we win. I hope.
That's been my theory too. And the Seattle Times today was reporting that they're on track to be the highest voter turnout in Washington ever. That's also the case in the United States. And I don't know if we lost our host, but we'll just keep talking. But I'm a little concerned about the results nationally with the presidential race, because it sort of undermines one of my theories. A theory is basically that we have two different voting groups. One is Republicans who vote pretty reliably, and then the other is Democrats who swing wildly from, if they get enthusiastic, they'll turn out. If they don't, they won't. My assumption is if you have high turnout, the Democrats will do well, but that's not necessarily what we're seeing across the country right now. And of course, my theory has been you have to give somebody something to vote for. Having somebody to vote against is not enough. But this year that is sort of special because I think people are particularly motivated to vote against Trump.
So I just want to jump in right now because I have Politico up the map and it is bleeding red everywhere. And I think that we're going to come across a situation potentially where Trump is going to call it based on this map. And there's still a lot of ballots that need to be counted. Everything right now, Trump is, let me just read off some of these numbers. Wisconsin, Trump is up only 70,000, but 50% of the vote is in. Michigan, he's up 250,000 and 40% of the vote is in. In Ohio, he is up 400,000 and 88% of the vote is in. Pennsylvania, he's up 300,000, 40% of the vote is in. North Carolina, 92% of the vote is in, and it's within 50,000 votes. Florida, and goes on and on. So, just seeing this map right now, I'm getting nauseous, but we got to make sure that every vote is counted, and that Biden does not concede, and that
Right.
every vote is counted, and we show up on the streets and report on it tomorrow when people come out on the streets, because Trump said he want to call it by midnight, and that's hour and 12 minutes from now. So
Wait, who's midnight?
Yeah, well, exactly. Hawaii.
Well, when you say red map, I mean, are these states that have been called, or these are simply with reporting?
The reporting, I believe. So I can share my screen really quick.
Yeah, why don't you share the screen? I want to see what we're actually talking about here.
Yeah, a lot have been called, but a lot of them that Evan was reading are just the percentages right now, the lead that he's holding right now.
And even the ones that are being called, some of them the reporting is still way too low. Some of them are just over 50%. And I saw Lane Wyndham retweeted somebody saying about Michigan that they just started counting absentee ballots. And for anyone watching Michigan, to expect for it to swing back blue. John, I don't know if you had any comments on that.
Have we still got John? If not John, we can get Don, or, I mean, actually, whoever wants to jump in on that. I mean, one of the things looking at that map was that there was a bunch of states that are shaded, which means that they're still in play.
Yeah, it says a lead. That's it. That's all those mean. But what I'm saying is that in all battle, in all war, whether it's political or kinetic, it's about the initiative. And if Trump comes out in an hour and says he won it,
the perception, man.
Yeah, exactly. So Biden has
to,
and all of us have to continue to emphasize, no, he didn't. So.
Well, the key here too is one thing that Evan said, and as I'm looking at the Constitution, there's one trigger point that's even above the vote, the us people voting or the electoral vote. Biden cannot concede. Once he concedes, that's the it part of it, okay? He cannot concede until all the votes are counted. So whomever at the point has been deemed the loser, as long as they don't concede, there's a lot more that can still happen.
At the AFL-CIO communications meetings that I've been to, they anticipated that Trump would be ahead tonight. And also that there was a very good chance that he would claim victory tonight. Right. And we have to do exactly what Evan said. We have to say, no, all votes haven't been counted. But that's what the labor movement understood was going to happen. While I have the floor, let me tell you that we lost our Senate race in Texas, and that Biden is currently about 3.5 points behind Trump in Texas.
With what percentage counted?
We've done sort of well on the. It's a lot counted, but that's not the point. The rural votes come in late, and they generally go Republican.
Okay.
And so if it's bad now, it will probably be worse for Biden by the time they finish. On the House seats, we might have taken one away from the Republicans, but the one that I was looking at here in Dallas, we're down 1 point.
So one of the things I'd like to put out for discussion among this group, because of your unique role for almost everybody here, for everybody, everybody here is either a member of the network or certainly, a labor journalist, is that we have a critical role with the audiences, with the platforms that we have to use those to communicate with our folks. And I'd like to get thoughts about, how that's played out and how you see that. People can jump in, or I can just, I can call on folks, however you guys want to do it. But I think that's Don.
Sure. Well, I'll just share a thought or two. I mean, my perspective is, all politics is local. And right now we're in a situation of deep global crisis and national crisis. There's gridlock in DC. No major legislation, by and large, takes place, generally speaking. But at the local level and the state level, I think, is the area where people are paying the least attention. And yet it's the area where I think individually and as local unions, we can have the most impact. So in Oregon, for example, I really think that in the last 10 to 15 years, the Oregon AFL-CIO and its affiliate unions have really transformed themselves into a very effective political fighting force and have won all kinds of gains that you just maybe really can't obtain right now at the national level. For example, putting the minimum wage on the path to 15, which we're almost there in some parts of the state. Passing, paid sick leave, huge, basic benefit in most of the world, but in the United States, very difficult. Last year we passed, I guess, the first in the nation rent control measure. It's not great, but basically it does limit rents as far how far they can go up. And I mentioned earlier in the call, in Multnomah County tonight, I'm hopeful that we'll pass a universal preschool. I mean, it's a very major benefit. And so I think sometimes there's a tendency to if our faction or the party that we prefer is out of power at the national level, to sort of, focus all of our attention on that and have a kind of a psychological malaise. But I really, I just feel like all of us, maybe we're more used to getting up the next day and fighting and looking where we can have an impact.
Yeah, well said, Don. Well said. Tina or Deborah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Or I should say Tina and Deborah.
Well, for us, one of the things that we were focusing on was the national race. It wasn't just here in Oregon, but also in other states, some of the swing states. There were a series of phone calls and text parties trying to encourage people who lived in some of the swing states to get out there and to vote. You're right, Don, in your analysis regarding the AFL, and life here in the Northwest is pretty good because they do a pretty good job with their allies. And so for us, like I said, the biggest move was trying to look at the national race more so than the local stuff.
Mm-hmm. Deborah?
I think too, what I'm enjoying and realizing is because we have, access to radio. I mean, I haven't thought about it until now, and during the pandemic, that's incredible. We don't have to depend upon any other source to get news out. We can be that source, and as we're seeing now, we're getting more attention because we're on the ground. We're generally there when it's happening, real live footage, real understanding, and not a lot of editorialization, and folks can, count on the coverage. And so I think folks are turning to, some of the more homogenous, homegrown, productions like we do with the labor radio. And I'm glad to see that the network is gaining notoriety and popularity as well. So.
Well, and I don't know if you caught it, but Liz Shuler was on earlier, and we talked to her about this, and she's very interested. I think we're going to actually have to have her to one of our weekly meetings to really talk some nuts and bolts stuff. We asked her if she had any advice for us, and she was like, "Well, I need advice from you guys." Like, okay, we can do that. So I think as you say, we're definitely on the national radar now. And one of the things was that she was talking about, well, do we want to basically do a top down thing, or do we want to do let a thousand flowers bloom? And one of the things that's so great about this network is that we are all out here doing it, every week. You all do your shows every week, frankly, in some cases you have institutional support and of varying levels, but, because you're doing shows, or Don, you're publishing articles, we have deadlines. That's what we do. We make deadline. We have shows that we have to get out. And so one of the things I've tried to tell the National is, I mean, look, we wouldn't turn down some large checks. We're okay with that. But, there are some things you can do, like make people, what radio show needs are good guests, right? make some folks available to us, get us some access, some very simple kinds of things that would really make a very big difference. So I do think that, and big kudos to Evan, who was the one who at our weekly meeting last week was like, hey, we should do a national broadcast. I'm like, what are you, out of your mind? You know?
Well, this is something that all the unions should be doing. I mean, my union, the CWA, has 700,000 members. We represent the journalists. We represent TV workers, and yet we don't even have a channel.
Right.
We don't cover our own strikes, our own struggles nationally. And it really shows the political problem and ideological problem in the unions that they don't see that as a high priority. They have their own
Steve,
covering live struggles. I mean, when you have journalists, when you have TV workers in your union, and you can't even cover your own struggles. I mean, we covered on KPFA, when I was on KPFA, KQED, the workers were having some pickets trying to get negotiated a contract with the PBS. No one else was there. I mean, this is a CWA union, you know. So I think the labor has the power and the resources and the ability to have a channel, to use social media of all these struggles. There's strikes going on that people don't even know about in this country.
So and, Steve, to your point, one of the interesting things is, and I want to bring Jeremy in on this because I think Smart is a really interesting example of this. If you look at the network, right, there are, and I haven't gone through and counted them, but there are some shows like Smart where the national, you know, has a podcast, right? But there's a bunch of Teamsters have a podcast, although actually the Teamsters podcast is recent. And there are a bunch of, you know, local Teamster folks who are doing these very unofficial. In fact, one of them's out of California, Steve. I think it's just some Teamster dude who's doing it in his truck on his lunch hour once every week.
I support that.
All right.
So, you know, but what was interesting, Jeremy, was that, you know, your communications person talked about how, you know, this was a change in your union, you know, relatively recently. So I'd be curious about your perception from your ground level into this question.
Yeah, it became real apparent that the message was just getting lost. Like we were, like Paul said earlier, when the message is coming from the very top, by the time it works its way down, it's like the guys at the bottom feel like they're being told what to do. And there was just,
they are.
Well, right. But there was a big disconnect there.
Right.
You know what I mean? Till that message got down. And part of it was because of the, you don't have that interaction, that regular interaction, you know, and even on a local level, it's hard for like my business manager to connect with the members regularly. He just can't do it. It's, you know what I mean? He just doesn't have the time. Right. So this was, when we started ours, it was a way for us to, open up the hall, open up the staff to the members. And, you know, like, you know, I said it a bunch of times, like just make a big community a little more intimate. And, so they saw that at the international level. And what's really cool is when they started planning this, like Paul said, 4 years ago, they immediately saw the need for a new vehicle of delivering a message. And this was one of the things they explored. And I got to be a part of the committee at the ground floor when they started planning this. And it immediately planted a seed in my head, but you know, I never really thought it would go anywhere, you know. So when my guys we all started brainstorming about a way for us to connect with our membership. I was like, why don't we do a podcast? I mean, I had all the stuff, and like, I can just fire it up. We'll see how it goes. It's not going to cost us anything, and you know, costs whatever a monthly subscription to a host site, and just run with it and see how it works. And so you know, we were able to do what the International was doing at the same time, because we pretty much launched almost like within a couple months of one another.
But I want to be clear, right? It wasn't like the International said to everybody, y'all should do this. And it wasn't like,
no.
Not like you guys went to the International and said, help us do this. It was that you all just did it. Like
I said, I saw the planning part with the International because I was with Paul's team when they were developing it, which was a big team. To be clear, it was he had a lot of people that he brought in just to get some feedback and see what we thought. And I just kind of took what I had heard from those meetings, and when we like on the local level, we just started talking about ideas like what can we do. And so no, this was nothing that like the International is not telling locals how to run their local. They're doing their thing, and then and we're all doing our thing, and we just kind of sort of like we talked about earlier, just because we're in different areas, there's still some things that'll overlap that we can use, like that we can implement in Kentucky that are also working in Washington DC or Washington State or whatever. There's some things that like everybody listens to music, everybody watches TV, you know what I mean? So it was like kind of tapping into that element. But yeah, no, we weren't directed to do it. We just gave it a shot, just tried something.
So I want to just go for a little bit more, but I think we're going to wrap up in about 15, 20 minutes. But Shannon, if I remember right, and forgive me if I get this wrong, but aren't you the president of the CLC?
Yeah, I am president of the Southwest Washington Central Labor Council in Vancouver, Washington, and I'm also a state vice president for the Washington State Labor Council for my district number 3.
So I would like you to talk a little bit about, as a leader, because I think this is a really, and especially after having talked to Liz, because this conversation that we're having here is going on at all levels, because I think that, folks are really beginning to put it together that, having our media is important. And not just something where we give it to the comms department. And frankly, a lot of locals don't have comms departments. A lot of CLCs don't have comms department. A lot of state feds don't have comms department, right? So you wind up with, Jeremy is not a comms department, right? But I'm curious, you as a leader, what was the process that you all went through, both you individually, but also I'm sure you had to sell this to your board, right?
Yeah, well, actually, and just to give you a little background on me, I actually have a degree in business marketing and economics, and I've been in the labor movement for 21 years as a union service marketing provider. So I have always said that the labor movement needs more PR, good PR, because we are getting bashed and bashed and bashed.
Killed.
I mean, just come on. And the problem is resources, especially when you're talking about a central labor council. My central labor council, we have over 50 affiliates, and we are representing close to 20,000 members in our area, but we do not even have full-time staff. We are 100% volunteer. So how this whole podcast thing came about is that we had an amazing delegate named Harold Phillips, who is from...
We've heard of Harold.
Yeah, I think we've all heard of Harold just a little bit. And he's got a beautiful, milky voice that I love for our podcast. But he came to me and said, hey, we should do a podcast for the Washington State Labor Council because we're going to need to increase communication during our 2020 election. And we really had to try to sell it. And unfortunately, the State Labor Council didn't take us up on that. But then we brought it back to our local CLC, and since we had saved money on travel and conventions and all of this stuff, we decided we should put some money and effort into our communications. And so we actually put together a first SAG-AFTRA podcast agreement, and we hired Harold as our podcast co-host so that he can help us put this all together. And he convinced me to come on board and do this podcast every week. And I just absolutely love it. And our delegates love it. And we have built so many relationships through the community, like with the NAACP, with the Democrats, with the Young Democrats. We've even had some good luck with Republican organizations that have been listening to our podcast. And we're trying to make it fun, and also educational for not only our Southwest corner, but just for people in general. I mean, all the topics that we're doing are topics that everybody is interested in. How to survive online education. How many of us need that? Raise your hand. Woo, I do. So that's kind of how our podcast got started. And of course, I had to sell it to our executive board because, you know, in the labor movement, you talk about democracy. We have to vote for every single thing, which is an amazing thing because we are the union, the union is us, and that is what it's all about. So that's how Working to Live in Southwest Washington came.
Yeah, and it is, and I mean, it's a fun one to listen to. But I had, because it was funny when Harold got involved, you know, in the network back in March. You know, he told us. I mean, we've been sort of aware of this whole thing as it unfolded. And he was like, okay, well, looks like the state Fed's not going for it, but you know, I think we may have some other possibilities. But it goes back to this discussion that we're having, that we're, you know, literally of playing out across the country. You know, here in DC, you know, I do comms for the Metro Council, so this, you know, it's the same thing. I have 200 affiliates. Almost every affiliate, right, has, for example, a Twitter feed and Facebook, right? And I was looking through. I try and go through all the social media. So they all got somebody told them get Twitter, right? Most of them have not updated their Twitter feed since God was a teenager. And I'm like, you know, there is no point to having a Twitter feed if you're not updating it, right? And
it just makes you look old and not knowing how to use Twitter.
Right. I'm like, take that down, you know? And so, but, you know, this is one of these things where comms is always an afterthought, or PR or whatever. Is an afterthought. So this sort of goes to, you know, where I was really happy to meet Don, which is great, and to, you know, see, you know, somebody who's got that kind of vision, and I think sort of a realistic vision, but, you know, that we've got this network. And, you know, we had maybe 24 folks in March, and now have found over 70 of these shows. And after the stream, God, what day is it? Tuesday. I think it was after Sunday's stream, or maybe it was yesterday's stream. No, this morning I got an email from some guy in, I want to say, if he's watching now, he can remind me. Anyway, somebody, an SEIU member in New England who wants to start a podcast. And so the fact that we have a network now that we can plug somebody like that into and get the support. A lot of us, I had to learn podcasting from the ground up. You know, let me go to Steve, because Steve has been doing this for a minute, and Steve and I go way back. You know, my Labor Fest here in DC was modeled after Steve's. The San Francisco Labor Fest celebrated. What was your anniversary this year?
27th. Well, we started, you know, it started in 1994, so it's a long time. But the idea of Labor Fest is to have a festival to commemorate a important working class event that you can have an annual festival of. And it turned into a month-long celebration, a film festival, art, music, culture. And this year it had to go, of course, virtual, a lot of it. But the idea is we don't have a labor party. We don't have labor culture as part of a tradition. Yet we have a tremendous labor history in San Francisco, but every place has working class history. So the idea is to have a local festival where you have events, music, culture, art, films, a labor film festival, and bring people together and have artists, teachers, you know, historians, writers, people who do work, doing things. So it's spread to Turkey and other countries. But, you know, I've been working like for decades for a labor channel in the United States. And we started in community access in 1994, actually, Labor on the Job, which was an hour-long community access show. And, you know, to be able to have uncensored labor programming and have it on cable was an important thing, because there are no other labor shows. There was Labor Beat in Chicago. So what has happened, however, with the development of the internet, like the Zoom call, it is now possible to have a labor channel, a national labor channel. It's possible to have reports from strikes in different places or different struggles. And I think we have to develop that. I think we need networks, international networks. We had a May Day I'm working in Pacifica, and we had an International May Day event, which I put the link to, which I think is the largest international multimedia May Day event that's happened. And we were able to get video from Taiwan, from South Korea, from South Africa, from Italy, all over the world, and put it together in a portal. And I think that's what we have to look to develop, a labor portal, both nationally and internationally, that includes labor programming, that includes podcasts, that includes live programming. It really infuriates me that you have strikes going on in this country. Nobody knows about them. Important.
Well, but you said that before, Steve, but I'm going to push back because people do know about those strikes. Somebody, there's the Shannon Myers and the Tinas and the Deborahs and the Dons and the Jeans, and the Jeremys on the ground know, and you guys know about them. And the point of this network is that you know about them.
But the national AFL-CIO on their website could have a list of all the strikes going on around the country.
Well, we're pushing it out.
There are things that we can do to just have a list of all the strikes going on, or what's happening around the country, so people can go there. I want to find out what strike is going on in the country that I can support, that I'm related to. Have it on a website of each national union and the AFL-CIO. That seems to be a problem. So this is something we have to develop, I think, in our trade union movement, and that is using technology, using communication technology to get our stories out. And from the ground floor. I mean, one of the great things is there was a strike of the Matamoros in Mexico, of the parts plant workers. I don't know if people know about that. 90,000 workers had a wildcat strike. But one of the things that they were doing is they were using Facebook to get their struggles out all over Mexico. And this is a strike that didn't receive a lot of information in the United States, but the workers themselves were using the technology. And I think we have to train ourselves and other workers, start using the social media to get their stories out around the country and put it on a channel.
Speaking of stories, I'm seeing some chat here. Do we have who's Carolyn Long? Is that one of your folks, Shannon?
Oh my gosh, that is Washington State.
That is Washington State.
Washington State, 3rd Congressional District against Jamie Herrera Butler.
Yes.
These are not official, at all. These are only Clark County results. And keep in mind, Clark County does win, or she does win Clark County, but she is up barely, just over 50-point-something%.
Okay.
So that is great news. I will take that. We also have some news in the 17th. We had some key races that we were looking at. So we had for Senate in the 17th, we were on supporting Daniel Smith, and this is a race that has been Republican for quite some time. So he is at 48-51, so numbers are still good there. But the big one that I'm excited about too is we've got a representative position in the 17th. We've been rooting for Tanisha Harris. This is her second time running. Sorry, she lost just about by 300 and some odd votes.
Oh yeah. Harold told us about that.
Up by 51-48. She is up. So we're excited about that. Let's see. I need to look at the 19th. That's another one we were looking at.
Let me get Don in here. Don says he's got some Oregon results. What do you got, Don?
Yeah, so earlier I was expressing worry about Peter DeFazio. Once again, he's just pounded this Alex Garlatos.
All right, Peter.
That's encouraging. He truly is he's a very populist Democrat. Never was one of those who went ever for the NAFTAs and that kind of thing. So
he had somebody running against him that was who was that was running against
Alex
him?
Garlatos. He's a 27-year-old National Guard member who happened to be on the train when this terrorist attack was taking place in Paris. So
right.
A movie about it, directed by Clint Eastwood, that he himself starred as himself. So he got a little celebrity boost, and he got quite a bit of money. Peter DeFazio pisses off certain moneyed individuals, hedge fund types, and they actually have tried to fund an opponent for a long time. For a long time, it was a doctor named Art Robinson. He's finally set his sights on a state legislative race in the area, and he'll probably win tonight. But it looks like DeFazio is going to win, so I'm very pleased about that. And then it looks like all of the statewide ballot measures that I talked about earlier are passing. There's a big cigarette tax. There's a measure that would decriminalize, for basically possession of drugs and turn people to drug treatment. which actually AFSCME was a big part of that coalition, and the unions generally endorsed it. It's just the right approach, and I think it's kind of exciting that could start to happen. And then, very importantly, didn't get a lot of attention. I mentioned earlier. A ballot measure to allow us to limit money in politics. Oregon, money in politics is out of control. We had state legislator races where over $1 million was spent on each side. And you know, these are races where you might have 60,000 voters turn out. You know, so it's really been a problem, and we've had a problem. I think, you know, trying to hold on to this Democratic supermajority, where so many of them are business Democrats that it's kind of hard to get a labor agenda passed, particularly in the Oregon Senate. So that's big. And then there's some local results, but yeah, it's I think locally I'm feeling pretty good.
Well, and that sort of goes to the point that Steve raised earlier. You know, you wind up in a situation like California where you got all these, erstwhile, all these Democrats, erstwhile labor supporters, who then turn out to not be able to do anything for working folks. So, you know, this is, again, to me, why it's a multi-step process. And Liz, I think, talked about this. You know, you get lots of labor involvement. You know, in elections, lots of people get registered, lots of people get involved, and then they have the election, and win, lose, or draw, and they all go home.
Right? Here's where I'm going to lose my credibility just a little bit and become a conspiracy theorist, which I joke really, but you know, sometimes I wonder whether there's not a little con game going on among the Democrats. I mean, what we talked about earlier, Democrats at the national level are voting for NAFTA. I think, to be fair, we need to remember that only about a third of them did. 2/3 of Democrats voted against NAFTA. But there's just too many Democrats who are trying to serve two masters. And when it comes to, I mean, Labor's motto is, which side are you on? And when it comes to those conditions, I mean, if both sides are in agreement, then great. But if there are two sides to take and you're a Democrat and you don't know which side that is, that's a problem. And we have too many of those kind of Democrats, particularly in the Oregon Senate. And so, you know, I did mention earlier, we've passed a lot of really good things at the Oregon legislature, which is exciting. But there have also been good legislation that dies sort of a shadowy death. And one of the things that the Republicans learned how to do in the last couple of years that it had apparently lain there in the Oregon Constitution, never used, but there was a quorum requirement. It turns out all you have to do is you can have a minority of less than a third of the legislature, because that's where the Republicans are now, and they can just walk out, go hide away, and no legislation can pass. So I kind of feel like if the Democrats were serious about stopping that, they would try to change the Constitution because the voters would support it. But I kind of feel like they'd rather have that finger to blame, oh, the Republicans wouldn't let us do it. They'd rather just keep saying, oh, remember to give us money, remember to get us elected. Yeah. We're just this close to getting the majority that we need. Oh, sorry, we have one or two corporate Democrats, so we can't pass the legislation we want. So we got to lower your expectations, but keep giving the money. Labor can be the cash cow and the workhorse, but when it comes to calling the shots, you know, let's maybe next session. And I don't want to be too down, because I really do think realistically we've accomplished a lot. Sometimes I get a little cynical.
Give me a happy
ending. Let me throw a little positive spin on that though, because this year, the last 2 years, for the first time, and I've been very vocal of this, I get tired of, you know, my union dues and we go and get all our members elected. The next thing they do is come to your house and sell it. That's what it seems like. But this year, Oregon AFL got tough. And it was like, sorry, if you haven't been our friend, no contributions, you're not coming and getting on the stage, you know, at Labor Day and get our endorsements. And I think that's, we need to also do that nationally. And regardless of who's in office, you know, it's like, hey, we're here. Y'all aren't listening. You know, how many emails did we get from everybody? Like 15 a day, right? You'll get emails next week, but still, my water's still dirty. What about our air? Hey, my kids are still going to, you know, doing school from home. So we need to stay on everybody. Regardless, everybody, stay on them.
Shannon?
And I'm in Washington now, Shannon. I live in Vancouver.
Hey, good. Come and volunteer with us.
Yeah, let's go.
So I'm looking at the statewide Herrera, Butler, Long, so not just by county. So it looks like Carolyn Long is at 46 and Herrera Butler's at 53. So we've got some work to do, hopefully.
Got some ways to go. So we're gonna actually wrap this, because we obviously, there's a lot more counting. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll let everybody know what our plan is for tomorrow. But the thing I want to leave us with is that, and you know, we in the network have been, and one of the reasons the network exists, one of the reasons, you know, we kept meeting week after week after week was because it became increasingly clear that no matter what happens, and it's been really obvious from this discussion tonight, right? That this is how people get information, right? This and being able to do this. And, you know, you got to give it to capitalism. Capitalism has put the tools of production, media production in our hands, you know?
That's right.
You know, they have made it possible for us to talk to folks for incredibly cheap. I mean, you know, it wasn't that long ago to do the kind of thing that we're doing now. You know, Jeremy would not have been able to afford this. His local wouldn't have given the money for it. Shannon, your council, if this was thousands of dollars, and actually you're one of the more expensive ones because you're actually paying somebody to do it. The rest of us are all volunteering, you know, but you wouldn't have been able to get the money for that. You wouldn't have been able to have the money for that, right? And so, you know,
and we should be paying him a lot more, honestly.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, you should. But you know, take it while you can. But the thing is that, you know, the fact when I like I said, I get to listen to a lot of these shows every week, and I am just blown away over and over again at the level of quality and the things that I learned, you know, on the local level. He's gone now, but the brother from Alabama was doing an interview with people in Latin America for his show in Alabama. You know,
well, you know, one of the things with this text now, Descript, you know, is you can actually have text on your shows. So all these shows could be text, could be a national text, you know, listing of what's going on in labor all over the country with the different shows.
And I think that's going to happen. I think that's going to happen organically. One of the things I should share with you, and Evan, you should talk about this. We started talking about this. I'm getting confused. It was either last night or the night before, or maybe both nights. But coming out of the success of this live stream, it is clear, first of all, that, and we already knew this, that the depth of talent and you know is just amazing, and so we've got that. But then there's also you know, the stream we had last night, you know, wound up, you know, reaching a whole lot of folks. We'll wait and see what numbers we get from tonight's stream. But there's clearly an appetite and an audience for a laborific you know, news show. And so we're going to figure out, you know, what we can do going forward, you know, to keep this going. And again, we're on the national radar now. I think we've got some internationals that are interested. We even have some folks who have some money that are interested. So I think we've got some things to go. Evan, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I do. And I have some closing thoughts as well. And
please,
you know, I think we need to be on message together. These coming days are going to be really hard for a lot of people, and there's going to be a lot of misinformation. And I think we need to be unified, that we demand all votes are to be counted. Number one, all votes have to be counted. And we may see some unrest, and we have to be emphatic that riots will benefit Trump. Riots will be used as a pretense from Trump to use law and order and potentially declare martial law. So if someone maybe who is at good intention wants to get out in the streets and start rioting, they're being unwitting dupes to help Trump, or maybe they're intentional provocateurs. Now, if Trump stops the ballot count, you know, we need to figure out ways to do it without riots. And obviously organized labor is always going to be the most potent countervailing force to the ruling class. So I just look forward to continuing to work with you all in the coming days, weeks, months, and keep building the momentum and the network and education, organizing, mobilizing, and eventually governing. And then my final thought is America, I see America as an idea more than a geographic place or of a specific people. And I see that reflected in labor, and I see that reflected in the Labor Radio Podcast Network. And I think this is the start of something beautiful, and there's some difficult days ahead. And I look forward to struggling with you all.
Well, Evan, you had asked us about, you know, I did a thing at one point asking us where we were 4 years ago on that night we'd all rather not remember. But I got to tell you, no matter what happens tonight, it has been an absolute pleasure and honor to spend it with you guys. Seriously, I otherwise would have been glued to all these results, but it really, I come out of this feeling incredibly hopeful and positive going forward. So thank you all. I know this
Well,
is
working people rise up. That's what we
yeah.
have to do in this country. Working people have to rise up. When we do, it'll be all over for some of the people who want to crush us. That's for sure.
All right, we'll follow up. We'll get the word to you in the morning what our plans are tomorrow. But again, thanks to everybody for everything that you're doing, everything that you will do, and keep strong. Keep strong.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
Thanks everybody watching, of course. All right.
No, talking about a revolution, it sounds like a whisper. Don't you know, they're talking about a revolution, it sounds like a whisper. While they're standing in the welfare lines, crying at the doorsteps of those armies of salvation, wasting time in the unemployment lines, sitting around waiting for a promotion. Don't you know, talking about a revolution, it sounds whisper. Poor people gonna rise up and get their share. Poor people gonna rise up, take what's theirs. Don't you know you better run, 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 run. Oh, I said you better run, 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 run. As finally the tables are starting to turn, talking about a revolution. Yes, finally the tables are starting to turn, talking about a revolution. Oh no, talking about a revolution. Oh, while they're standing in the welfare lines, crying at the doorsteps of those armies of salvation, wasting time in the unemployment lines, sitting around waiting for a promotion. Don't you know, talking about a revolution, it sounds whisper. And finally the tables are starting to turn, talking about a revolution.
Welcome to the Labor Radio Podcast Network's live 2020 election coverage, focusing on what organized labor is doing throughout the United States to ensure all votes are counted and labor's voice is heard. Reporting will be based on contributions from our national network of members. The views expressed do not represent official positions of the network. The Labor Radio Podcast Network has over 70 labor-focused shows in 4 countries and serves as a one-stop shop for audiences looking for labor content and as a resource for labor broadcasters, podcasters, and content producers. You can follow the conversation with the hashtag LaborRadioPod, where we are broadcasting working people's voices 24 hours a day. And I stopped the stream, I believe.
All right, I think we're clear, right? Yeah.
And let me stop recording as well.